The hands of his watch move with agonizing slowness, as though counting down to the end of the world. In the hours since contacting Ryoko, Koji went back to his apartment, showered, changed clothes, and even had his first full meal in days. He wanted to take a nap, knowing that he needed the rest, but no matter how hard he tried, sleep never came. Forcing himself to relax only made his nerves colder and sharper. With nothing else to do, he decides to wander the city until nightfall. Downtown Tokyo is bustling, surrounded by smiling pedestrians, bright lights, and windows decorated early for Christmas. He feels as if all of the happiness in the world has gathered in this very place. Koji takes it all in, burning it into his memory like it's the last thing he'll ever see. Is the world so beautiful because of the horrors that lurk in its shadows? The glow of the city can no longer warm him. Perhaps that is why it seems so precious. Koji watches the city for hours. It feels unreachably distant, like reading the obituary of someone you loved long ago. His phone rings at 8 p.m. It's Ryoko. The conversation is short. She hangs up as soon as they decide where to meet. And so ends Tono Koji's final night of peace. Is he gonna die or what? Ryoko arrives at the diner at 1 a.m., 1 hour later than agreed upon. She has a heavy-looking duffel bag under her arm. Koji doesn't feel like asking what the bulges represent. Ryoko doesn't sound at all apologetic, but Koji decides to just nod expressionlessly. Only few tables are filled at this hour, like lonely islands in the midst of the vast restaurant. After sending the bleary-eyed waitress away with an order for 2 coffees, Koji and Ryoko are left all alone in a corner of the dining area. Koji asks bluntly while sipping dutifully from his 3rd cup of watery, tasteless coffee.
何分確証を得るまでには至ってないんだが。
Fuminoriも相当じれてると思います。こちらから連絡すると言ったきり、丸1日放置してますからね。
そんなにも彼は君との接触を意識してるのか？
サヤっていう名前には露骨なほど反応してました。
In the silence that follows, Koji tries to soothe his parched throat with another mouthful of weak coffee.
そうか。やはりサヤなのか。
It's obvious that her grimace isn't for the coffee.
今なら田んぼ先生はもう答えを知ってるんですね。サヤというのが何なのか。
Ryoko tries to ignore Koji's question by nursing her coffee, but that only works until the cup is empty. Staring at the brown stain at the bottom of her cup, Ryoko says, her voice hard and flat.
君は私の忠告を無視した愚か者なわけだが、もう一度だけ証拠りもなく言わせてほしい。殿君、君は手を引いて全てを忘れるべきだ。
証拠りもないですね。
Koji replies, smiling bitterly instead of glaring at her like he did before.
俺がまだ先生や文則とは境界線を挟んだ反対側にいるとでも？
君はまだ一番致命的なものまでは見ていない。君にとってこの事件は無二の親友がいきなり正気を失ってに目覚めたっていう。ただそれだけの内容なんだろ。
That's all? The things that Fuminori has done are so horrifying that Koji's only recourse, his only hope of coping, is to kill the man who was once his friend. Yet despite that, Ryoko makes this nightmare sound like just the beginning. Koji still doesn't understand where her morbid cynicism comes from, nor does he want to.
それだけじゃないとしたら、残りは先生の妄想なんじゃないですか。
そう思えるならまだ君の傷は浅いってことさ。
Her brusque tone says that she doesn't care whether or not Koji is satisfied with her explanation.
今ならまだ時間が君の傷を癒してくれるだろう。君は最後の一線を踏み越えていない。
Koji considers Ryoko's words calmly, without letting himself get emotional like before. The final line. True, Fuminori is somewhere beyond that. Although Koji has gone far enough to be willing to kill Fuminori, he has no intention of eating his enemy's flesh once he's dead. That, at least, still separates the two. Then what about Ryoko, who has treated Koji like an ignorant fool ever since she saved him from the well? How close is she to Fuminori?
先生の傷は俺よりも深いと。
In response to Koji's biting question, Ryoko's mocking smile turns inward.
この銃はね、実家の父のものなんだ。
Ryoko pats one of her duffel bag's bulges.
こいつがロッカーから消えたせいで、父は責任を問われて地元の猟友会から除名させられた。申し訳ないと思ってるよ。私は両親にとっては自慢の娘なんだ。それが金庫の銃を盗み出すなんて想像もしてないだろう。
そうするだけの必要が先生にはあったと。
いいや、全然。
Her quick denial isn't what Koji was expecting.
その頃にはもう王外のことは一見落着していた。少なくとも私はそう思っていた。奴は姿を消したきり、もう二度と私の前には現れないだろうと安心してた。この銃で何かを撃とうとか殺そうとか、そういう必要があったわけじゃない。
Then why did she steal it?
じゃあなぜ？
眠れなかったんだよ。ただそれだけ。
Ryoko pauses, perhaps needing time to decide how best to explain.
それまではベッドサイドにナタを隠しておいたんだ。夜一人で部屋にいるのが耐えられなくてね。どんなに世界が底抜けにめちゃくちゃになっていこうと、悲鳴を上げて逃げ回る以外の選択肢が自分にはあるんだって、そう納得させるためにはね。
Koji doesn't know what to say. He's amazed, impressed even, that someone with such a serious case of delusional paranoia could function as one of T University's top doctors.
でもそれじゃ大した効き目はなかった。悪夢は日ごとにひどくなっていく一方で、安眠するにはナタじゃまだ足りなかったんだ。それで父の銃を盗んできた。こんな風に重心を詰めるとね、散弾がもっと広範囲に飛び散るようになって殺傷力が増すんだそうだ。アメリカでも重罪になる改造なんだとさ。私はそれをクローゼットの奥に突っ込んで、それでようやく眠れるようになったよ。3日に一晩ぐらいはね。
At this point, Ryoko seems to have gotten everything off her chest. Smiling like someone who just finished a hard job, she adds,
銃はいいよ、本当に。相手に向かってぶっ放すもよし、それでダメなら自分の口に突っ込んで引き金を引くっていう選択肢もある。
先生は専門家の治療を受けるべきです。
端的な感想ありがとう。でもね、君だって他人事じゃなくなるよ。これ以上先に進むんならね。
Koji is already doubtful that meeting with Ryoko was the right thing to do. The one thing that he and Ryoko have in common is an unwillingness to leave Fuminori to the proper authorities. Fuminori not only killed Koji's lover and friend, but even went so far as to defile their corpses. Koji isn't about to give him the chance to get off on an insanity plea. No matter what crimes he must commit, Koji will end Fuminori with his own two hands. If he doesn't, he knows that he will never sleep again. It helps to have a partner in crime, but only when that partner doesn't cause trouble. Ryoko talks big about exposing Ogai's secrets, but she might just have a head full of delusions. If so, Koji needs to rethink the whole thing.
この先すべてを先生に任せるというのなら、先生のことを信用させてください。先生をそこまで追い詰めるほどのものがオーガイっていう男にあったという証拠を、彼が何をしでかしたのか、すべて俺に見せてください。
そこまで言うかね、まったく。
Ryoko smirks and shakes her head ruefully, but puts up no further resistance. She pulls a stack of paper from her bag and hands it to Koji. The loose leaf sheets are bound with string.
一行読んだら続きは次のページの同じ行だ。まあ触りだけでも読んでみるといい。
As directed, Koji looks through the handwritten pages and gives up after less than 3 minutes.
怪奇 SF の走行か何かですか。罪のない悪ふざけですね。彼にはこんな子供っぽい趣味があったわけだ。
Koji deliberately scoffs at the document, doing everything he can to show contempt for what he just read. At the same time, he tries desperately not to remember the mountain of bones in Ogai's bathtub and the unidentifiable smell per meeting Fuminori's house.
1年前、オーガイがうちの大学に持ってきた資料も、その文章と同じぐらい突拍子もないものだった。
Ryoko says, coldly ignoring Koji's disdain.
奴は大学の機材を無断で使ってこっそり検査をしようとしたらしい。だがドジを踏んで露見した。そこから先はもう大騒ぎでね。オーガイが使おうとした機材から察するに、奴はそいつを P3 レベルのバイオハザードとして取り扱うつもりだったらしい。
Biohazard?
その程度の用心で十分だったのかどうかも知れたもんじゃないんだが、近隣の住民を退去させるべきだったんだが、まあそこは偉い人たちが偉い人なりに頑張って全部なかったことにしてくれたよ。その代わり私たちはキャンバス中のネズミを一匹残らず駆除する羽目になった。ネズミとかつてネズミだった何かをね。
At their first meeting, Ryoko brushed Koji off when he asked about Ogai Masahiko. Now, however, she's telling the whole story, her voice as flat and emotionless as a machine's.
事の究明には結局皆が匙を投げた。オーガイが持ち込んだ資料がどういう起源のものなのか誰にも突き止めることはできなかった。まあ結局みんな賢明だったわけだ。理性は理性、ざれ言はざれ言、そういう線引きを危うくしないで済む程度ってもんを心得ていた。でもあいにく当時の私はそこまで賢明じゃなかった。
Ryoko pauses for a moment, then grins with self-disdain so maniacal that it strikes Koji like a blow.
あれこれ探って暴き出して、私はオーガイが何をしていたのか知った。彼が関わっていた連中や彼をそそのかした連中も突き止めた。ナタと添い寝するようになったのはその頃からだ。この世の理性ってものがどんなにタガの緩んだ穴だらけの頼りない代物なのか理解するようになったのはね。
As though fleeing from the quiet insanity that he keeps glimpsing in Ryoko, Koji finds himself paging through the loose leaf in his hands. He reads a line at random. The organism's flesh is not fibrous but reticulated. Put simply, it is an extremely tough substance that expands and contracts not in one direction, but in all directions. This means that slashing or piercing damage has very little effect. Since the flesh can contract in any direction freely, any wound will be sealed instantly. It's nonsense. What else can it be? If he lets himself believe it, then everything else, all the logical rules that define the world, will be rendered meaningless.
じゃあ先生は信じるんですね、この内容を。
疑う理由なんてとっくの昔に見失ったからね。
Ryoko reaches into her duffel bag again, this time removing a stainless steel thermos that looks able to hold about 500 cc's of liquid.
こいつが鞘を倒す切り札だ。調達するのに手間取ったが、多分こいつは敵面に効く。
A secret weapon? What could it be?
ついていけません。
Koji snaps, no longer able to disguise his frustration.
鞘が何だろうともうどうでもいいです。俺は文則を終わらせることができればそれでいい。あなたには任せておけません。
そうか。
Now that she's given up on persuading him, her assent is swift and cold. At this moment, Koji's fate has likely ceased to matter to her.
いいだろう。君は先坂文則を仕留めるために全力を尽くすといい。私もその気に乗じさせてもらうとする。君の邪魔はしないし、君が仕損じた時にはきっちりと私が帳尻を合わせてやる。
Despite the determination in her voice, Koji can't bring himself to trust this paranoid doctor completely.
あなたの持ち合わせている理由で文則を殺せるんですか？
潔癖症なんだよ、私は。ああやって人の世界の拉致外に隠れ住んでいるような奴らが我慢ならない。奴らは寝室のゴキブリだ。枕元でカサコサ這い回る音を無視して眠れるか。見つけ次第殺して駆逐する。そうせずにはいられない。 私の精神衛生上の問題だ。
Her reasons are similar to Koji's own. He doesn't want to bring a murderer to justice, nor does he want revenge for Omi and Yo. If he did, he could have left everything to the police. The reason he can't is that the villain is Fuminori. The man he believed was his friend has turned his whole world upside down. Everything and everyone worth a part in this madness is to blame, and that includes himself following the betrayal. His self-loathing, his desire to destroy is what's keeping him on his feet.
さあ、それじゃあチェックメイトに駒を進めよう。咲坂君を呼び出すといい。
Koji nods, pulls out his cell phone and calls his friend for what will probably be the last time. The call goes through quickly. He must have been waiting for it.
待たせたな、文則。こっちの準備は整った。
Koji、今どこにいる？
Fuminori must have been quite anxious to hear from Koji. His voice is hard and completely emotionless.
お前のすぐ背後とでも言っておこうか。
Koji can't help but smile at Fuminori's disappointment. Perhaps Ryoko's maniacal sadism has rubbed off on him.
筑波を解放する決心はついたのか？
ああ、背に腹は変えられない。
He's lying, Koji thinks, remembering the contents of Fuminori's refrigerator. Just what part of you did you eat, Fuminori? Did you carve that poor girl up like a pig?
Koji、お前は集めた資料のすべてを証拠ともども持ってこい。その内容を見て納得できたら、僕らは用を引き渡す。
いいだろう。場所は？
まずは応戦の Y 駅まで来い。そこでお前が一人なのを確認してから、詳しい場所を教える。
念の言った話だな。
妙な細工はなしだ。45分以内に来い。
Fuminori hangs up without waiting for Koji's response.
俺が単独なのを確認するまで居場所は教えないつもりみたいです。
ただの医大生にしちゃ心得てるな。感心だ。
Ryoko's praise sounds serious, drawing a glare from Koji.
私の車はここに置いていこう。トノ君、君の車のトランクに人一人が入る隙間はあるかい？
大丈夫ですか？正気ですか？映画の見過ぎですよ。
そんじょそこいらの映画よりは危険な冒険なんだよ。
With those bold words, Ryoko grabs her duffel bag and rises from her seat.
で、この店を待ち合わせに選んだのは君だったな。
そうですか。何か？
コーヒーの責任を取れ。
She says and tosses him the check. Even after Koji arrives at Y station as directed, Fuminori calls him and makes him change locations 3 more times. Koji is beginning to doubt that Fuminori is trying to make sure that he's alone. He might just be using the time to guess when Koji arrives at each designated location. Nevertheless, Koji can't let his guard down. Fuminori might choose any moment to make sure that he isn't bringing any help. If he makes a mistake and puts Fuminori on alert, Ryoko will lose her chance to take him by surprise. She'll just have to put up with the cramped trunk for a little while longer. After the nature preserve and the dry riverbed, the 4th location to which Fuminori sends Koji is in the thick forest at the top of the foothills, high above the developed area at their base. His car's GPS shows a road that leads nowhere, but according to Fuminori, there should be an old abandoned sanatorium there. The park and river were empty this late at night, but during the day would likely have considerable traffic. This time, however, his instinct is telling him that it's definitely a place that no one could find, not even by accident. It looks like this is the final stop. Koji drives up the steep incline, soon leaving the residential neighborhood behind. Even though the hands of progress are right at its doorstep, the undeveloped forest is darker than he expected. This looks like a great place to live in secret, or to kill someone and hide the body. Places like this, lost and forgotten, aren't found only in deep jungles and hidden valleys. Holes in the world are everywhere, even in the midst of civilization. A broken down gate post suddenly appears in the court's headlights like a ghost rising from the darkness. It looks like this is the final stop. Koji rolls up to the gate and turns off the engine, giving himself to the silence of the forest. His phone starts ringing almost immediately. He doesn't need to check who it's from.
着いたぞ。
あ、聞こえてた。ようこそ我が新居へ。
Fuminori is nearby, close enough to hear the sound of the engine. A shiver of excitement shoots up Koji's spine.
中に入ってこいよ。用も待ってる。
Fuminori hangs up without another word. After grabbing his new flashlight from the glove compartment and checking that the revolver is still in his pocket, Koji opens the door, making sure to pop the trunk at exactly the same time. Ryoko shouldn't need any more explanation than that. Realizing that the interior roof light will stay on and broadcast that the trunk isn't closed, Koji quickly unscrews the bulb, then gets out of the car and deliberately slams the driver's side door hard. Mountains of trash litter the front yard, forming a serviceable barricade. Koji sees everything from small refrigerators and mow pits to huge chunks of concrete and plaster that must have been abandoned by construction workers. The fact that they could get away with leaving all the stuff behind shows just how remote this place is. Glancing sidelong at the rear of his car, Koji sees no movement inside the barely open trunk. Ryoko knows what she's doing. She'll probably wait until Fuminori's attention is focused on Koji before making her move. The moon is brighter than usual, allowing Koji to walk through the front yard without tripping on debris. Staying alert, he heads for the building beyond the mountains of trash. Something must be buried underneath the piles of garbage, because the whole yard is filled with a sharp stink of chemicals. Even though homeless probably wouldn't come to this place, if you need to get out of the wind and rain, there are plenty of shelters more suitable. When he reaches the gaping, doorless entrance to the building, Koji glances back the way he came, as the car parked at the gate is hidden behind the mountains of trash. Even if Fuminori is watching from inside the sanatorium, he shouldn't be able to see Ryoko crawl out of the trunk. It looks like she'll get her chance to take him by surprise. How many times now has he stood like this, alone in some ominously silent place far removed from his everyday life? Sneaking into deathly quiet houses to find traces of unimaginable happenings has become as normal as going to class. The houses that he explored before were like freshly shed cicada shells, empty and dilapidated, but with traces of the life they had sheltered. This place, however, is different, a perfect ruin, its walls and pillars rising from the dark forest like an army of ghosts, with no sign at all that people once lived and worked here. The structure resembles a skeleton more than a shell. Time and the elements have stripped it of its former shape, and now there's only death. Koji has gone as far as he can. This must be the final stop. What will Fuminori's next move be? He must be planning to kill Koji, but how? Just as he's about to turn on his flashlight, Koji reconsiders. If he wanders around with the light on, he'll be broadcasting his exact location. That will give the advantage to Fuminori, who's probably lying in wait for him right now. He holds the light before him in his left hand with his finger poised on the switch. In his right hand, he raises the revolver, keeping it pointed in the same direction. Now ready to fire when he turns on the light, Koji steps quietly into the dark ruin. It takes a while for his eyes to adjust, but even when they do, he has only moonlight streaming through empty windows to guide him. Everything appears grey and indistinct. However, Fuminori has to deal with the same conditions if he's hiding here. This is a battle of nerves, exhausting and deadly, where the first to make a sound and give away his position will lose. The rooms on both sides of the hallway are all open, some are even missing their doors. Koji creeps up to each entrance, checks to make sure no one is inside, then carefully proceeds on. The stink that he noticed in the garden has changed. Now it smells more organic, like rotting meat. It's the exact same smell that filled Fuminori's house. The organism's flesh freely expands in a manner that renders piercing damage meaningless. Koji grits his teeth and forces the madman's words out of his head. What good can come of taking them seriously? This isn't the time for such useless... Squish. Koji freezes and stares down the hall. It was a wet sound that he heard just now, like someone dragging their feet through a swamp, and it came from the room at the end of the hall. Something is there. Something alive. Koji creeps towards the sound, his light and gun at the ready. No, it sounds like someone squeezing mud through their fingers, and as he gets closer, Koji begins to hear breathing. Could it be Fuminori? No, that's impossible. He should be waiting for a chance to ambush Koji, not making careless noise. As he proceeds, the strange sound coming through the cracks in the concrete walls grows clearer. Before he knows it, he's standing on the threshold. The room is filled with a thick, viscous darkness, just like every other room that he's passed. There's more than just darkness, however. Something is there. He can hear pain breathing like that of a wounded animal, and what sounds like sobbing. Sobbing? Is it you?
誰だ
Koji whispers into the darkness. Now that he has given away his position, he might as well turn on his light. For some reason, however, Koji feels that to do so would have disastrous consequences. Sobbing. The last time I heard her voice on the phone, she was sobbing. The wheezing suddenly stops. And then... a whisper comes out of the darkness, though not a human voice, not by any measure. It speaks some blasphemous semblance of human words. A nightmarish flash of insight connects the dots in Koji's mind.
つくば
It can't be. Yuo doesn't sound like this. She doesn't smell like this. But if it's not Yuo, then how does it know his name? Why is it begging him for help? No, it can't be Yuo. She's human, not some creature that slithers and hides in the shadows. The thing wriggles closer, his reason cries out, imploring him to switch the light on before it's too late, or to turn and run, if he cannot. But Koji is unable to make either choice. He can only call out in vain to the amorphous shape in the darkness.
つくばなのか直江まさかつくばなのか
Something soft and slimy slides over Koji's toes. Instinct overrides his will, forcing him to turn on his light and shine it at his feet. The white beam reveals everything, the merciless truth that finally shatters Koji's sanity. Terror wipes his mind of all but two words, gun and trigger. His finger responds with instant obedience. There's a burst of tremendous light and sound, both more intense than he expected, and then the destructive forces are swallowed up by the darkness. His ears are still ringing from the bang, but he hears a weak voice coming from the shadows. Koji screams and pulls the trigger again and again, believing that salvation can come only from the barrel of his gun. He already shot 4 times, didn't he? He doesn't have any bullets anymore. Light and darkness, explosion and silence. They dance their dance 3 more times. Koji doesn't even need to aim. The horrible creature is right at his feet, far too close to miss. Ryuko warned him how many bullets were left in the revolver, but that information has already been driven from his mind. Even after the cold, heavy gloom wraps itself around him once more, Koji keeps pulling the trigger like a man possessed, paying no heed to the clicking of the empty weapon. His panic-stricken legs suddenly give out, sending him down hard on his backside. Even then, he keeps firing the empty gun. He knows no other way to erase the memory of the thing that he glimpsed in the beam of his flashlight. The light which fell from his hand during the attack is now pointing in a completely different direction. And though all 4 bullets must have hit their target, they were Koji's last card to play, which leaves him alone in the darkness with no way to defend himself. And just as he realizes this, the mass of rotting flesh rolls onto him like a tidal wave. I guess this is Yo's real form now, huh? He can no longer even scream as the thing pushes him onto his back. With fear sealing his throat in an iron grip, Koji struggles desperately against the monster as it crawls up his body towards his face. Covering his face with his left hand, he scrabbles wildly along the floor with his right, searching for a way out that doesn't exist. His mind is that of a feral animal, empty of everything but primal terror. And that is why, when his right hand closes around something hard at the last moment, he recognizes it instinctively as a weapon. Putting every ounce of strength into his arm, Koji swings the heavy object at the creature on top of him. He hears the thud of a blunt object striking something soft and wet, and then Koji's attacker rolls off him. As soon as he's able to move freely, Koji leaps to his feet and grabs his new weapon with both hands, brandishing it like a charm to ward off evil. Only now does he realize that he's holding a rusty steel pipe. What is this, Silent Hill? The monster is still sobbing. With a cry that is part terrified scream, part enraged roar, Koji raises the steel pipe and brings it crashing down on the cowering creature. He hears the wet sound and feels the blood-chilling sensation of its thick, soft flesh absorbing the blow. These combine to evoke an instinctive loathing that wipes his mind of all but the urge to destroy. Consumed by the same desperation with which he kept firing the empty gun, Koji rains blow after blow down on his enemy. After the 10th blow, it stops sobbing. After the 20th blow, it stops moving. And after the 30th blow, it begins to feel and sound more and more like he's beating a puddle of viscous liquid. Koji doesn't stop thrashing the creature until he recovers enough of his senses to realize that whatever it might have been before, it is now nothing but a lifeless corpse. The pipe in his hand, covered with unidentifiable fluids and filth, suddenly feels unbearably heavy.
君はまだ一番致命的なものまでは見ていない。
Ryoko's voice plays back in his head, and at last he knows how merciful her warning was. Now that his eyes are as open as hers, he's able to laugh in contempt of his own foolishness. 20 years of memories in the light of the sun, if they were indeed precious to him, then he should never have come to this place. The black flames of despair rise within him, consuming fear and revulsion and pity. Only rage and hate remain. Every cell in his body cries out for vengeance, for the blood of the man who poisoned him with truth and tore him from the womb of innocence. And then Koji, slave to hate, hears the sound of someone sneaking up behind him. Koji whirls, swinging his steel pipe with all the force he can muster. His enemy hastily leaps back to avoid the strike, surprised by his failure to catch Koji off guard. Twisted shadows dance in the beam of the light on the floor. Readying his pipe for the next blow, Koji faces off against his second attacker.
Fuminori.
Before this moment, Koji could not have imagined that he would speak his friend's name with such hatred.
おいおい、今の一振り、まるっきり手加減抜きかよ。
Even now, Fuminori is smiling, as though the huge axe in his hands is just a sick joke.
参ったな。正直なとこ、お前はもう少し迷うもんだと思ってたんだけど。
迷うだと？俺が？貴様に？
Koji sneers too, unable to contain his contempt for the notion.
貴様、近江をどうした？筑波に一体何をした？それを考えてもまだ俺が貴様を殺すのに迷うだと。
そいつは言いがかりのつけ方が逆だろ、コウジ。
Fuminori growls, looking sadly at the pile of dead flesh at Koji's feet.
コウジの分際で僕の世をひどい目に遭わせやがって。世の10倍は痛めつけてから殺してやる。
The blade of Fuminori's axe carves a murderous arc through the darkness, glittering menacingly in the faint light coming from the floor. Koji raises his pipe to block the ferocious swing. The heavy impact numbs his arms, but his large frame takes the blow without giving any ground. Fuminori presses the attack, delivering a second blow and a third. His axe, designed for chopping down trees, is deadlier and more durable than the piece of pipe Koji found discarded on the floor. Each strike Koji blocks sends chunks of rust flying from his makeshift weapon. He can't win as long as he is on the defensive. He needs to create an opportunity to attack.
Come on.
Koji blocks a crushing downward swing, then pushes back hard before Fuminori can pull away, throwing him off balance. Fuminori stumbles backwards, then plants his feet to steady himself. Taking advantage of his opponent's temporary immobility, Koji delivers a punishing low kick to Fuminori's outer thigh. Fuminori grunts and retreats, swinging his axe wildly to prevent Koji from following up with another attack. Koji, however, does not press his advantage. He just stands where he is, calmly sparing Fuminori with his stare.
お前、喧嘩に慣れてねえな。
Fuminori roars and comes in for another attack, but the damage to his right leg seems to be slowing his swing. Easily blocking the axe with his pipe, Koji waits for Fuminori to exhaust himself. Fuminori delivers blow after heavy blow, roaring savagely all the while. What he does not realize, however, is that the situation now favors composure, not brute force. When Fuminori raises his axe high for yet another attack, Koji sees that his movements have grown dull enough. Seizing the opportunity, Koji charges into Fuminori's range and grabs the haft of the axe with his left hand. As Fuminori recoils in fear, Koji brings his pipe crashing into his enemy's unprotected side. He feels the crunch of ribs breaking. The pain drives Fuminori to his knees. Staring down at Fuminori's defenseless head, Koji, surprised by his own lack of emotion, raises his pipe high to deliver the finishing blow. Which is when something wraps itself around his left ankle. That should be Saya, huh? The instant Koji panics at the unexpected sensation, something soft yet strong winds itself around his right leg and drags him to the floor before he can resist. He twists his body and tries to swing the steel pipe at the unseen enemy behind him, but his right hand, too, is seized by the same flexible force. He wasn't able to feel it through his pants, but now his blood turns to ice at the cold, slimy sensation of the thing wrapped around his uncovered wrist. That monster still alive? Fuminori says encouragingly, even while kneeling on the floor, his face twisted in pain. He manages a terrible, victorious grin. Saya. This monster is Saya. Koji struggles desperately to free himself from the creature's slimy grip, but more tentacles swarm over his body, rendering him helpless. The horror has already driven Koji half mad. Just imagining the creature's appearance is enough to send him into a mindless panic. His scream suddenly dies as a slimy appendage seizes his throat. This most deadly tentacle isn't just cutting off his windpipe, it's trying to snap his neck, and it's getting tighter. Koji is certain that this is the end, but just as his vision begins to dim, an explosion brings him back to his senses. With a horrifying inhuman scream, the creature releases Koji and retracts its tentacles. The first thing he sees after regaining his mobility is Ryoko running down the hall with a smoking shotgun in one hand and a silver tube in the other. Ryoko responds by tossing him the tube. Though still lying on the floor, he manages to snatch it out of the air. It's the thermos she showed him at the restaurant, the one she called her secret weapon. Ryoko shouts to Koji. At the same time, she aims her gun at Fuminori, who's still on his knees 5 paces away. The double-barreled shotgun still has one shot loaded. The monster that attacked Koji is writhing in agony. It hasn't yet recovered from Ryoko's shot. But he's already seen that bullets aren't enough to kill these creatures. Now is his only chance. Fuminori growls, gritting his teeth against the pain of his broken ribs. Forcing himself to be calm, Koji stands and carefully unscrews the lid of the thermos. There is no question in his mind that something extremely potent is inside. As soon as it is unsealed, a thick white mist pours out of the thermos and the surrounding air turns freezing cold. Instantly guessing what's inside, Koji lobs the thermos at the pile of flesh convulsing on the floor. The thermos sails through the air, spewing white fog into like a baptismal font, showers its liquid contents upon the hellish creature. Its scream this time is incomparable to before. The monster thrashes in agony, wreathed in white smoke. Its screams are joined by Ryoko's cackling. Her eyes blaze with manic glee, as if to say that sanity was a small price to pay for the joy of at last vanquishing her nightmare. Fuminori staggers to his feet, roaring black curses. His rage seems to have drowned out the pain of his broken bones. Ryoko is not one to underestimate the threat posed by his axe. Her mad laughter fades away, leaving only a cold smile as she pulls the trigger. With a short burst of dark flame, Ryoko's gun sputters and dies. Oh shit. Ryoko is not an expert on firearms. It never occurred to her that shotgun shells need proper storage, and besides, she always expected that any situation where her gun would be necessary would also be one that she would not survive. Cursing in anger and dismay, Ryoko breaks the shotgun open and awkwardly pulls the dot out. Meanwhile, Fuminori stalks towards her like a vengeful demon, the head of his axe screeching as it drags along the floor. I have to stop him. Koji tries to charge Fuminori, but only succeeds at standing himself sprawling. One of his shoes is stuck to the floor, frozen by the liquid to nitrogen. As Ryoko fumbles in her pocket for a new shell, Fuminori closes the distance and raises his axe in both hands. Koji curses and rips his shoe free of the frozen concrete, but he knows that he'll never make it in time. Ryoko thrusts a new shell into the chamber of her shotgun and snaps it closed, then looks up to find her target. Fuminori is right before her, too close to evade, and his axe is already crashing down with the wind howling in its wake. The sounds of bones shattering, tendons snapping, and flesh tearing blend together in foul harmony. Well, shit. The thick blade enters through Ryoko's left shoulder, plowing through her collarbone and shoulder blade, smashing several ribs and popping her lung like a balloon before stopping in the center of her chest. Her expression frozen and shocked by the impact, she sprays a geyser of blood from her mouth. She should have died instantly, but through some unimaginable force of will, Ryoko clings to life for a few seconds more. Grinning through her bloodstained lips, she raises her shotgun. Not to the front, but to the side. Beyond the barrel of her gun, wearing a 77-degree Kelvin mist like a white cloak of death, is the weakly wriggling Saya. Fuminori's scream vanishes into the roar of the shotgun. The destruction is absolute. The impact of the shotgun pellets obliterates the half of Saya's body that fell prey to the liquid nitrogen. The frozen particles of Saya's shattered flesh drift to the floor like snow. Even the creature's special biology is insufficient to seal a wound of this size. From the opening pour its internal organs, a tide of liquid, slime, and fat, whose color is far too foul to belong to any living creature. The monster convulses, wailing in a weak, pitiful voice.
Saya.
I don't even want to imagine how this looks from his perspective. With his axe still buried in Ryoko's body, Fuminori stares at the dying creature, his expression utterly devoid of emotion. Koji grabs his pipe and prepares to attack Fuminori from behind, but freezes when he sees the emptiness on the face of the man he hated. Fuminori pulls his axe out of Ryoko's corpse, then looks at Koji with glazed eyes. There is no recognition in them, nor hate, nor rage. When Koji meets Fuminori's blank stare, he knows. There is nothing left in him to kill. Fuminori grips the axe closer to its head and raises it high, the blade towards his face. Koji doesn't know whether he should interfere, but even if he wanted to, what could he say to stop Fuminori? Fuminori pulls his head back, slowly but surely, then drives his face into the blade of the axe like a spring-loaded toy. Crunch. The skull caves in with a dull, wet sound, and the spray of blood catches Koji in the face. Despite Fuminori's utter lack of hesitation, his first attempt at suicide only succeeds in transforming his face into a hash of crimson. Fuminori pulls his head back one more time, even slower than before. Then, with every ounce of strength still left in his body, he slams it into the blood-stained axe. The sound is redder than before. Fuminori's body goes limp, then tumbles face first to the floor. Koji stares at the two mangled corpses for a while. He feels completely left behind, like he can't remember why he's standing in this place with a steel pipe in his hand. The stale air filling the ruined building becomes choked with the stench of blood, and the crimson puddles gradually spread across the snow-covered floor, yet the tranquility of the scene makes it seem like a painting. A soft, slimy sound breaks the silence. Koji looks at the mortally wounded monster. The creature is on death's door, but even so, it moves, slowly, feebly. It drags its broken body through the sea of blood. It's coming for Fuminori. Koji had forgotten his anger, but now it comes surging back at full force.
死ねえよ
He growls and stabs the monster with the end of his pipe. It convulses in agony but keeps crawling towards Fuminori. Koji explodes into a frenzy of rage.
死ねえよもう死んでろよこれ以上文則に使えるんじゃねえよ
Again and again he smashes the helpless flesh beast with his pipe. Something tells him that if he does not stop it here, he will truly have lost. The monster, however, never succumbs. It struggles on beneath his blows until finally it reaches Fuminori's corpse.
触るな文則に触るなてめえは何様だってんだよ
Koji keeps swinging, his fury unabated even as tears start to pool in his eyes. The monstrous slime flies through the air, joining with the blood already covering his face. The creature extends one thin, trembling tentacle to touch Fuminori's shoulder, then lovingly caresses his blood-stained cheek. And then it stops moving. Even in its final moments, the monster would not let Fuminori go. It died joined with him. At last, Koji knows that the world he knew is lost forever. Omi says enthusiastically, the exposed bones of her face clattering. What? Omi? Isn't she dead? Chunks of her body are missing as though something's been nibbling on her. It makes her look a lot thinner. She's been worried about her weight recently, but now she shouldn't need to diet.
そういえばオミってこの間初めてスケートやったんだって
What? He sounds amused, but it's hard to tell from his expression since his face has been cleaved in two by an axe.
20歳になって初体験ってのは興味そうそういないんじゃないかな
子供の頃はなんとなく怖かったのよあの靴なんだか刃物みたいでさ
Wait, isn't that the conversation from the very beginning?
うんわかるあの靴で顔を蹴られたらきっと僕みたいになっちゃうよね
Well, close to it. What made you laugh at Fuminori's dumb joke? You were never used to laugh with such exuberance. She seems truly happy now that she and Fuminori are officially together.
でもいきなり蹴って殺せたのオウミちゃんすごくない
容量はバットとそう変わるもんじゃないからな思い切り振り回して斧頭の重さに任せて叩きつける感覚とか
海のりにそう言われたもんだからさ騙されたと思ってやってみたわけよ
What is this feeling? Something is wrong, though Koji can't put his finger on what.
私も見てみたいなオウミちゃんが食べられるところ
Is Koji having a nightmare? Or what's going on here? Ah, that's it. When he sees Yo's envious smile, Koji finally realizes what's bothering him.
なあつくば
どうしたのコウジ君
お前だけなんで普通なんだ
Yo tilts her head quizzically like she doesn't understand what he means.
普通って私はいつも普通だけど
でもお前確かあの時
ああ
Yo nods in understanding.
なんだ私がコウジ君と違う姿になってた頃のことずいぶん昔の話じゃない
昔なのか
そうだよ
She replies, deflecting Koji's confusion with that uncannily cheerful smile.
だってコウジ君も今じゃ私たちの仲間じゃない
Oh, of course. Koji looks down and is satisfied to see wriggling tentacles where his arms and legs should be. When he opens his eyes, his mattress and pillow are soaked in sweat, so it was a nightmare. It's always the same nightmare. He doesn't know how many times he's had it, but at least he's not leaping out of bed screaming anymore. He sits up, clutching his throbbing head. It's 4 in the morning. He hasn't had nearly enough rest, but he probably won't be able to get back to sleep tonight. Time for a smoke. A full pack will last him until dawn. Now, where did he put the pack he bought yesterday? Koji wanders sleepily into the den, where yet another old friend is waiting for him.
ひどいありさまだね。
What?
ああ、先生。いたんですか。
She survived? Ryoko's chopped up corpse is sitting at his dining table, looking as deathly pale as ever as she sips coffee from a mug. Is that another nightmare?
毎晩ずいぶんと辛そうじゃないか。ろくに眠れてないんだろ。
そうでもないですよ。薬を飲めば割となんとかなります。
Hallucinations like these are easier to deal with than elaborate nightmares like the one he just had. They should probably worry him more though. Oh, so it's a hallucination.
あの時私の忠告を聞き入れてれば、ここまで追い詰められることなんてなかっただろうに。
もうやめましょうよ、それは。過ぎたことじゃないですか。
Ryoko chuckles, smiling the same cruel manic smile that she used to when she was alive. Her left arm hangs from her half-severed shoulder, dangling like a forgotten wind chime.
そう。結構折り合いをつけてるんだ。
先生だってそうだったんでしょう。普段は優秀な脳外科医で通用してたんだから。
上辺だけ取り繕うだけなら、そんなに難しいことじゃないからね。
The corpse shrugs her intact right shoulder and grimaces in disgust as she takes another sip of her coffee.
でもね、多分この先はもっと悪くなるよ。心の傷は時間が癒してくれるけど。君はまあ、言ってみれば、毒に感染したようなものだから。
She's probably right. Everyone dreams at night, no matter how dim the memories may get. The nightmares will always be there to tear into Koji with fresh fangs. The insanity that has taken root in his heart will grow, eventually consuming everything that's left inside of him.
俺の場合、先生っていう前例を見て学んでますからね。抜かりはありませんよ。
へえ、そうなの。
Koji nods, smiling confidently, then stands and walks to the bathroom, where he retrieves the weapon that he keeps hidden behind the mirror. Ogai's revolver, the one souvenir that Koji brought back from the other world that night.
ものすごい苦労したんですけど、結局ようやくその筋の人と渡りをつけましてね。弾も買ってあります。驚きましたよ。銃そのものより高いなんて。
Is he going to kill himself?
おやおや。
In the mirror, Koji sees Ryoko with her axe-inflicted gash reversed. She raises her mug in a toast to Koji's resourcefulness.
で、何発買ったわけ？
一発だけです。
This time, it's Koji who shrugs her shoulders. He uses both, exercising his privilege as the survivor.
それ以上必要になるような状況は、俺は願い下げなんで。
The corpse in the mirror nods sagely, her smile approving.
ほんと、わきまえてるんだね、トノ君。
There is a brief silence. Koji doesn't really feel like getting all melancholy with the corpse.
ねえ先生、いい加減ファミレスのコーヒーはやめましょうよ。なんなら新しいの入れますから。
When Koji turns around halfway through a sentence, he realizes that the room is empty but for the silence of the night. And so Koji returns to the world of the sane. He lights his first cigarette of the night and takes a deep drag. While sitting alone in his den, puffing on his smoke, he stares at the gun in his hand. He knows just how precarious a cliff he's standing on. The final line of which Ryoko spoke is now one step behind him. Koji no longer has anything to protect his soul. Now that Ogai Masahiko's fantasies and Tambo Ryoko's delusions have all become tangible horrors, he knows what insanity and despair truly are. Back in the real world, Sakisaka Fuminori is wanted for several gruesome murders. It didn't take long for someone to discover the stockpiles of human meat in the empty Sakisaka and Suzumi homes. In the two refrigerators were found the remains of Suzumi Yosuke, his wife and daughter, and Takahata Omi. They found the clothes and other effects of Tsukubayo, but were unable to locate any trace of her among the various body parts, a fact that made Koji's nightmares all the more vivid. Dr. Tambo Ryoko of the T University Hospital vanished mysteriously around the same time. Because she was Fuminori's chief physician, the police have been investigating her connection to his crimes. As for the two corpses secretly buried in the backyard of a certain ruin, well, they'll probably never be found, but this incident will become just another cold case. Koji alone knows what really happened, and he has no intention of revealing it. Not now and not ever. Ugai's writings were not nonsense, which means that everything else was. What fool was it who said that men are the lords of creation? Those who can believe in paltry things like human wisdom and valor are those lucky innocents who have not looked into the abyss. Koji can no longer share in their blessed ignorance. He knows he has been defiled by the insanity called truth, and he will never believe again. If he has been poisoned, as Ryoko's ghost said, then that poison is none other than the truth itself. Just as pure oxygen is harmful to the body, the naked truth has the power to destroy man's mind. Only by diluting it with lies and taking it in small doses can humans maintain a healthy soul.
どんなに世界が底抜けにめちゃくちゃになっていこうと
Words once spoken by the living Tambo Ryoko passed through Koji's mind.
悲鳴を上げて逃げ回る以外の選択肢が自分にはある
That, without a doubt, was the comfort that she kept hidden in her bosom, the only thing that allowed her to face her dreams each night. Koji has taken his predecessor's lessons to heart. He's prepared for anything. One bullet is always behind the bathroom mirror, promising him salvation. Is this the end? Yes. It is. We reached the first ending of Saya no Uta. And if I am not mistaken, there are actually 2 more endings. So in the next episode, I will go back to one of the choices and try the other one. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye bye.